Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending Improving's July 30th virtual Lunch and Learn. We are thrilled to have you join us today. Before we start, I want to inform you about a feature in the presentation that'll make the session more interactive. Please make note of the question mark icon at the upper right of the presentation screen. Clicking that icon will open the question and answer feature, which allows you to send the moderator questions to be delivered to our insightful presenter at the appropriate time. Speaking of insightful presenters, I am happy to introduce you to Angela Greenwell, who's a senior consultant at Improving, as well as a certified professional coach. Today, Angela will be sharing a webinar entitled Coaching Techniques for Managing Uncomfortable Situations. Angela, the floor is all yours.
Excellent. Can you hear me and see me okay?
Yep, you look great.
Okay, fabulous. All right, thanks everyone. As the introduction said, we are going to be talking about managing uncomfortable situations with confidence. And my name is Angela Greenwell. I'm a certified professional coach and an ELI master practitioner. What that means is I can assess clients about how they are thinking and feeling about situations and give them information about their thought process. I'm also a core dynamics specialist in the field of transitions and leadership. And core dynamics is really about self-mastery and self-leadership principles. So before we get started, my ask, because this is kind of maybe a different sort of presentation, is that there's going to be a lot of disconnected pieces of information and they're not going to come together until the very end. So please give this your full attention throughout. And I promise it's going to be worth it. The other thing is we're going to be talking about the human experience. And so the more that you can find what's kind of funny or humorous about the human condition, the more that this is going to benefit you. Because when we can laugh at our shared nature, we are going to be able to more easily transition out of stress and into confidence more quickly. And we're going to talk about more why that is. But it also helps us to develop empathy for each other, because this is what we're going to talk about today is something we all share as humans. So I'm going to start with a Zen story. And yeah, when I first heard this story, it just made me laugh so much. So the way the story goes is that there is a horse, across the field, and a man on this horse, and they are riding very, very quickly down a road. And it seems as though they've got somewhere very important to go. The man on the horse is looking very determined, and they're riding really fast. And so there was another man standing, alongside the road, and he shouted to the man on the horse, where are you going? Thinking, again, they're going somewhere really interesting and important. And then the man replied, I don't know, ask the horse, right? And so you have to think, like, why is this funny? And it's funny because when we see somebody, that seems important, that seems confident, they seem to know what they're doing, and they tell you, no, I have no idea, like I'm just winging it, or it's not even about me. It's not what we expect. And so the symbology here for this presentation is that as humans, we are on horses all the time, and that means we're on autopilot. We're letting our instincts drive our thoughts and our actions, and it's things like stress and fear that most often cause us to get on these horses, where our instincts just say we're taking over, and we're going to put you in reaction mode, and we're going to get you to a point where we all feel safe. And so when we're stressed, we don't feel confident, and that's because our conscious selves, our higher thinking is not actually in control, and we kind of know that. We feel like we're on this horse that's just doing what it wants to do. And so the reality is this is human nature, and it happens way more often than we think. And I'll give you a couple of stories later to emphasize this. So the topic for today's presentation, the areas that we're going to cover, is why do we go into autopilot? What causes it? Then why do our instincts do us a disservice when it comes to thriving at work and thriving at life? And then understanding that our instincts aren't great when it comes to the things that we want out of life. We're going to talk about how do we overcome them so we can feel confident, especially when handling uncomfortable situations, which is so common as consultants. So we're going to start with our brain. And oversimplifying, but helping you understand two parts of our brain. So the first is the amygdala, and this is really where instinct resides. And the job of the amygdala is for survival, right? It's not thriving, it's just survival. And so it's constantly scanning our area for risks. It operates in the background and it has minimal resources available to it to assess and make decisions. And this is really important, and I'm going to talk about it more in a minute. And so when our brain, our amygdala, identifies threat, it rushes and uses emotion and story to get us to react as quickly as possible. It's trying to beat our conscious thought so that it can make us do what it wants us to do, which is generally, stay away from danger, get back to safety. And so when we're on a horse, when we are in that autopilot, we actually don't see things objectively. We see them through a lens of fear and threat. And if you think about perspective, we're almost in a tunnel vision. We have very little ability to assess what's going on. We're just worried about the immediate threat in front of us. And so the amygdala, I want you to think like survival, reaction, fight, flight, freeze, feeling stressed. When there's high emotion, if you're worried, if you have a lack of confidence, if you feel overwhelmed, if there's anger, frustration, conflict, indignation, these are all signs that your amygdala is taking over. So I'm going to tell you one story. I'm going to start it and I'll finish it in just a second, kind of to show how the amygdala is just not like, oh, life-threatening risk in front of us. It's actually ordinary, everyday things. So like most of us, Amazon delivery comes to my house a couple times a week. And one time I went out to get a package and I couldn't find it. And I was like, well, where on earth is this package? And I go looking around and I realized, well, it's in the middle of my driveway, which is, 20 feet from my front door where they normally appear. And so I just thought wow, what on earth was that driver thinking? That's so rude, so disrespectful. They just left a package in the middle of the driveway where it could rain or whatever. And so it really upset me. And so you can hear high emotion, frustration, anger, a little indignation, right? So a little amygdala going on here. And I'm going to pause and I'll come back to the story in just a minute. So the other part of our brain is the prefrontal cortex, and that is where objectivity comes from. And so with objectivity, we have this conscious thought, right? Or the conscious thought comes from the prefrontal cortex. This is where we can openly assess, question, evaluate, see the objectivity, and use creativity in our thinking. It's when we use the conscious thinking, we can arrive at conscious choices, which will result in way better outcomes. And when we use our prefrontal cortex, it takes a lot of energy and time. So it is biologically expensive, different from our amygdala, which has minimal resources. And so our brain prefers not to use it. It has that idea of food is scarce. Don't use a lot of conscious energy or thought and energy to consciously think, where we can just be automatic, right? It's far more resource effective to let the amygdala do most of our work. And that's why it's so easy, to respond in those sort of amygdala automatic autopilot ways. And so rather than stressed, when we use our prefrontal cortex, we're going to feel at ease, grounded, calm, confident, right? You can kind of feel the difference between the two. And so I want you to think empowering. You're owning your choices. You have high agency. There's confidence, creativity, curiosity, and this is where intuition comes in, right? You don't have a lot of intuitive thoughts and creative thoughts when you feel like there's a bear attacking you. Okay, so the conclusion of the example, right? I get my package, I come inside, I'm kind of about it, and then I forget about it. And then a couple days later, Amazon comes again, and I think, oh, let's just go see who this driver is, right? I'm almost wanting to pounce on them. So I'm looking, and I'm upstairs, I can see out to the driveway, and I'm watching. What are they gonna do? And so, opening the door, And the guy's coming out of the door, and I'm like, oh, who is it? And then, you know, my dog, who normally is upstairs with me, I see him rush out of the dog flap, run around the back of the house, which there's normally a fence with a gate, but the gate's open, and he keeps running around the house, right? And then confronts the Amazon driver. And I think, I didn't realize. Of course, the Amazon driver is going to put the package on the driveway and not mess with my dog, right? So the kind of like to sum up that story, if you think about it, it never occurred to me to be curious. It never occurred to me to say like, I wonder why. I wonder what happened. Instead, I just jumped to a conclusion, and that's what our amygdalas do. So amygdala and limited resources, right? Because that's kind of, if you understand, when you think with limited resources, you're going to understand like why we do what we do as humans and how our brains work. So if the amygdala's goal is surviving and not thriving, right, it has to assess and make decisions really quickly. It doesn't have a lot of time to figure out if that bear is going to eat you or not, and if your life is in danger. It's going to assume more on the side of you're probably going to be in danger than you're not. And so to do this, what it does is it creates a very limited worldview of what is right and wrong. And so in our heads, we're living in this mindset of how the world is, and it's super simplified. And that allows the amygdala to, with minimal resources, make decisions for us. It also creates these limited beliefs on what we can and can't have, what we can and can't be, and what we can and can't do, because when we pre-decide, we have a lot less to think about. And what is known is safe, right? We want to feel safe, or at least the amygdala does. So clearly these limited beliefs are limited, right? They are not objective. They were often formed when we were really young. When we saw things in the world that were uncomfortable, we made a decision about what was true and what was not true. So a lot of these beliefs we have are from a 6-year-old mind. And another thing, because the amygdala has limited resources, it wants things to be easy. And so we look for the easy solution, which is often the unrealistic solution, right? We want other people to change. We want the world to change to suit us. It should be different, rather than addressing reality as it is, because that's hard. So in other words, we can't believe what we think, especially under stress. And although our thoughts and views may feel very true in that limited worldview, they're not actually truth. So given that we're consultants and we all have the amygdala, let's talk about specifically, what do we face as consultants, and what do we have to deal with? So what mainly triggers the amygdala is various flavors of fear. The main ones that I come across in my coaching practice is uncertainty. When we don't know what's going to happen, we don't like it. We like to know, and we like to decide ahead of time. When our expectations go unmet, it's another form of uncertainty. We get surprised it didn't happen the way we thought it was going to happen. And when we anticipate discomfort, right? So if we think we're going to have this hard conversation, or somebody's going to get mad at us, there's this like, I don't want to do this, it's scary. That's when our amygdala starts to take over. So, a couple of examples just to kind of see, uncertainty and consultancy. That's pretty much everything we do, right? We have new clients. We're introduced to new industries. We are having to learn new technologies. We're dealing with a team that it's a new team to us. We've never met this combination of people before. We have challenges that we've never seen, and we've got problems that we've never solved before that we have to solve, right? It's very much the definition of a consultant. Unmet expectations in consulting happens all the time, right? We make a recommendation on what technology a client should use, and they don't use it. Or we have a design that we love and we pitch it to our team and they don't like it and they want to go a different way. Or, we have expectations that, let's say, for example, you're in QA and team members are writing code and it doesn't work and you get frustrated. Or, there's all of a sudden client budget constraints that you didn't see before, and you have this design that takes a lot more money than what they have. Other ways that our amygdala gets triggered is when we anticipate discomfort. And it could be, we have production issues and there's urgency there. There's delays in our development. There's budget overruns. Our requirements are changing. Scope is creeping. We have to have those hard conversations with our clients. We have team issues. Team members aren't getting on or not seeing eye to eye, and there's conflict. So it's basically anytime you might expect somebody's going to get mad or upset, or we have this feeling that we're going to be in trouble, right? Our amygdala is going to come in. So for consultants, in the job that we do, managing how we react to uncertainty, to expectations, and to anticipated discomfort is key for us to be successful, and especially if we want to be happy as consultants. So now we're going to talk about, well, how do we manage our amygdala, since we all have one? And so in coaching, there is a 4-step process, and I'm going to run you through that in summary, and then we'll go into it in more detail. The first step is awareness. You can't fix something that you don't know is happening. And the amygdala is amazing at not letting us see what's going on with its stories and its emotions. So our brain can hide from us what it is that we're doing. It's pretty smart. And so we need to notice when we're on the horse, when our brain is taking us somewhere automatically. And that comes from stress and fear and limited thinking. So the sooner we notice, the sooner that we can address it. The second step is, noticing is not enough. We have to transition out of the amygdala into the prefrontal cortex, and that starts with curiosity. Investigating these limited stories and these defensive thoughts, thinking, what is this thought? Where does it come from? Why am I thinking that? And trying to understand, our mind is really trying to protect us. So what is it protecting us from? And if we can start to understand, my mind was trying to protect me from a disrespectful Amazon driver, why is disrespect, something that triggers me? You can get to know yourself when you become curious. The next is acceptance, and this is a hard one. I'll go into this more in a minute, but you have to accept what's real, not what you hope should be real, or wish should be real, or insist should be real. You have to accept what actually is real so you can deal with it as it is, so you can have better outcomes. And the last one is choice, right? Once we reframe our perspective, we engage the prefrontal cortex, we have to make choices consciously, not reactionary, and then focus on what we can control rather than what we don't control. So I'm going to go through that in more detail. The first is notice stress in the moment, right? And you can say to yourself, I feel stressed, I feel overwhelmed, I'm angry, I'm defensive, I'm irritable. And you might notice that you have habits that you do when these things happen. For me, when I feel overwhelmed, it's like deer in the headlights. I can't make a choice. I don't know what to do next. And so for me, that's an aha moment of, I'm in stress, I'm in overwhelm, what's going on? Judgment is another one. When we're being judgmental about ourselves or others, we think, I'm so stupid. Why did I do this? Or they're so stupid. They should have known better. That's the amygdala talking. So you've got to stop and notice. Don't just keep going with the story. You got to break the story and say, okay, clearly something's going on here. What's happening? And you can feel it in your body too. If you're feeling tightness in your chest, or your face is getting red, or you're tensing up, that's again indicators that the amygdala is talking for you and you're on a horse. This is an awareness tool that coaches use, and it's one of the best pieces of knowledge that I gained in my coaching training. And these are 7 levels of mindset, how we're seeing and reacting to the world. And on the lower levels, that's where your primal brain is most strong, and that's where you have high judgment. And then on the higher levels, that's where you have more access to objectivity and conscious choice. So we're going to go through the bottom 3 first. This line marks where you move out of what we call catabolic thinking into anabolic. So basically out of stressful thinking, out of the amygdala into that prefrontal cortex. So the first one, we call it level 1, is victim. And this is where you have almost no agency, right? The idea that you have is I lose. And in the fight, flight, freeze context, this is freeze. you can't do anything. And it might feel like you're a victim or a martyr. You might be overwhelmed. You might be saying like, I can't figure it out. I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know where to start. It's too hard, right? And you may be focusing on what you can't control, the stuff outside you. There may be blaming others, and there may be wanting somebody else to just fix it for you. So each of these mindsets has a benefit to them. You do them for a reason, right? And so it keeps you away from danger. If you are stuck in the, the cave, let's call it, like there aren't any bears in the cave, you're going to be safe. And so your brain thinks this is a good strategy. We're just going to stick with, playing the victim. And you don't have responsibility. You don't have burden. You're saying like, I'm not taking that on for myself. So you're basically wanting other people to fix it for you, right? And the thing to realize is we can have judgment about these words. When somebody says you're being a victim, you're clearly like, no, I'm not doing that. But realize we all have some type of victimhood in our strategies of dealing with stress. And there's no shame in it. It's just, what flavor do you have? What does it look like for you? For me, it is overwhelm, right? So it's that deer in the headlights. Like, I can't make a decision. I don't know what to do next. And when people talk me through, like, all right, I need you to like give me some steps here to get through this. And when they talk me through the steps, you think, that's so obvious. Why couldn't I think of that? And I couldn't think of it because I didn't have access to my prefrontal cortex. So that's victim, level 1. Level 2 is anger, equivalent to fight. And the idea behind it is I win and you lose, right? So it feels like defensiveness, contempt, frustration, righteousness, indignation. There's a lot of binary thinking, right? So I'm right, you're wrong, this should be the way it is, or this shouldn't be the way it is, always, never. So we use those sorts of words. And, we, again, fixate on what we don't control. We want other people to change. We're telling them what to do. And so what this achieves is we try to make the problem go away. We try to brute force it. We have more agency than what we did as a victim. But, we're kind of like brute forcing and bullying our way to a solution. And when you assess most of America and the assessments that we do as coaches, corporate America, dealing with the things in corporate America life, level 2 is the most common, normal, and under stress way that we approach life. And that kind of says something. So level 3 is a really interesting one. It's where we get stuck. We don't want to be angry. We don't want to be victims. We can often get stuck in level 3, which is tolerance. And what it feels like is avoidance, denial, rah-rah, like we're just going to be fake positive and think happy thoughts. And we're going to pretend it's not that bad, right? So we have a lot of coping mechanisms and we're not actually addressing or dealing with the problem. And so what it achieves is that, again, we're not angry, we're not in victim, we have more agency, we feel a little less stress, but again, we're not facing the hard thing, right? Because we don't want to, that's too ugly. And we're hoping that it'll take care of itself. But the danger is we're still under stress, we're not dealing with the issue, and it erodes confidence. We are not going to feel confident if we hang out in level 3 very long. So these are I call them the horse strategies that your brain uses to get you in the cave, protecting yourself and not dealing with the problem at hand. So once you're aware, like these are ways that you might deal with something in a stressful situation, you need to start investigating your thoughts and your stories and see what's going on there. So it starts with acknowledge and validate. Meet yourself where you're at, right? Acknowledge and validate what's true to you. You can't just go from, oh, I know I'm under stress to fix it. You have to actually say, like, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What do I believe is true, but is not really truth? And you have to honor that. When we judge our feelings and say like, I shouldn't think this, I shouldn't feel this, that's more amygdala. That's more judgment and stress on top of the judgment and stress you already have. So it's just another strategy. Your brain is saying like, oh, no, she's leaving the cave. Get her back in here. Like, make her think some shame thoughts. keep her safe a little longer. And so, we have to feel acknowledged and validated before we can move on. And you can do this for yourself. So if you're saying like, oh, I feel angry, well, it's okay to be angry. I'm so mad that person X did this. Well, okay, it makes sense that you're mad that person X did this, right? So meeting yourself with respect. Then it's about getting curious. And this is how you kind of get out of level 3 into the anabolic ways of thinking. Asking yourself, is it true? We already said our brain, you can't believe everything it thinks. So you have to ask, is this true? Is this limited worldview true? Are these limiting thoughts true? What might else be going on here? What might be a bigger truth, right? What might be another explanation to the reason why the Amazon driver left the package on the driveway? Is this something I'm sensitive to? Why am I sensitive to it? Is there a value that I have that somebody is stepping on? Well, what's that value? You can ask, what am I protecting myself? And things like, well, if I had this little curiosity being, what would curiosity say to this? What would discernment say to this moment? What would objectivity say to this moment? So you're asking questions that's going to trigger your prefrontal cortex. The next is noticing judgment. When we have judgment, again, we have more stress and less ability to have agency. So judgment shows up in oversimplified, limited binary thinking. You'll hear it as good, bad, right, wrong, should, shouldn't, always, never, right? When you hear those words, most likely you're in a level 2 sort of high judgment thinking. And again, this is, more level 2, like feelings of anger, contempt, frustration, superiority, right? And it is disempowering because you're saying the world should change. Other people should change to make me happy. So you're focusing on what you don't control. And the thing to point out is if you think like, okay, I just need to think happy thoughts. Non-judgment is not happy thinking. It's objective. You're assessing. You're using discernment. You're not making anybody right or wrong. You're just saying, well, okay, what's going on here? So once we have been aware and we've used our curiosity, now we need to accept what's real. And I'm going to tell you that this is hard. It's so hard. Because that's not how our brains want to work. Our brains want to work in the limited worldview because that's what it's comfortable with. It created it. It knows it. It's certain. But when we step outside of that, we have to actually see what's really going on. And I love this quote from Byron Katie. She says, when you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time. So she's kind of funny with this stuff. So we refuse to accept reality because our brain wants things to be easy. It is way easier to insist that somebody else changes to make us happy. It's harder to look at what we're responsible for and what we need to own. So, again, we want the amygdala wants the world to match our limited worldview. Life gets really easy when the world acts the way we think it should act, right? And the thing that helps me is to humility, right? I am not the CEO of the universe. The world does not work the way I need it to work, right? I am a member of the world. I am not the ruler of the world. And just realizing it's arrogant to think others should do what I think is right. So here's some acceptance examples, and this kind of shows why it's so hard. So they shouldn't have said those mean things to me. So I think we can all agree that being mean is not a nice thing to do. And we have children, we teach our children, don't be mean, right? And so it's hard to say, well, they should have been mean. But what really is going on is you're saying that, like, I value kindness. When you get mad that somebody's mean, they've stepped on one of your values, right? Because you value kindness. They weren't kind. And so acceptance says to acknowledge, well, I value kindness. That person can choose to be unkind if they want. That is their right as a human being. And I'm not in charge of their actions, but I am in charge of my response. And so that separates what I can and can't control. Rather than saying they shouldn't have been mean to me, you're trying to get them to be different, right? And you don't control that, so you're completely disempowered. But when you say, well, they can be however they want to be, I value kindness, I'm going to act kindly because that's one of my values. And now when somebody's unkind to me, I can use boundaries to handle that appropriately, right? And another way of dealing with this, and this is from Byron Katie too, is when you have this they shouldn't have done it idea, you turn around and say, no, they should have done it because they did do it, right? What happened was that person was mean to me. Should they have been mean to me? Yeah, because they did, right? It's arguing, it's like saying it shouldn't be raining right now when it's raining. Well, of course it should be raining because it's raining, and you can use that, but of course, that's one of the things I coach my clients on is when something happens to them unexpectedly, to turn around and say, but of course this should have happened. Now what do I want to do about it? So embracing acceptance, this is where we get stuck, right? Because we think acceptance means we agree with it, we condone it, we approve of it, we chose it to happen, and that's not what acceptance means. Acceptance just means you're acknowledging it's real so you can deal with it appropriately, right? A phrase that helps me is to say it's not what I wanted, but it's what I have to deal with, right? So you're acknowledging you don't want this. This is what's real for you, but this thing still happened and you have choices to make. Pragmatically, if we argue with reality, we can't come up with an appropriate plan to address it, right? Wishful thinking is not going to create good outcomes. So we have to see reality objectively as it is and then make conscious decisions, right? And so that's the next bit. What do you want to do about it? Let's make some conscious choices. So now that you know what's real, you can say, given that this thing is real, what do I want to do about it? And you can ask yourself, what mindset do I want to respond from? So if you think about that 1 through 7, do I want to respond from victim, anger, tolerance, compassion for self, compassion for others, looking for what the opportunity is, synergy, intuition? You get to choose. And the thing about choice is that you don't have to choose from the highest one. You don't have to always say, what's the opportunity here? You can say, no, in this situation, I'm going to be angry, and it's a choice. It's not a reaction. The point is that you choose and you understand what the consequences are for your choice, and you accept them and you do it consciously. And so focusing on what you do control. Again, a lot of times we disempower ourselves because we want everybody else to change. What you control is your attitude, your words, your actions, and how you show up. And I'm going to talk about showing up more in just a minute. Letting other people own what is theirs to own is empowering, right? Because a lot of times we feel like stuck because, again, we want them to change. Our happiness depends on them doing something that we want. You need to stay in your own business. What they do is their business. What you do is your business. And it's far more empowering to just stay in your business. Byron Katie also has a quote where she says, minding my business is a full-time job, right? Really managing your brain, truly managing the amygdala is a full-time job. And so that's where your focus should be. And so if this is hard, if it feels like, by giving up, telling other people what to do is putting you at risk, then you need to look at boundaries. What is boundary setting? How does that work, right? Where you separate, you give other people free choice and you own consequences for when people break your boundaries. Another thing to look at is, does this matter? A lot of times we get wound up about things that do not matter. And so, is this something that really requires your attention? Should you be this wound up about this thing? Another thing that our amygdala does not like is hard choices, right? So a lot of times we could have this story and all these ideas of, like, I shouldn't do this, it's too dangerous. And, and you have this story upon story of like justifying why you're making this decision. But all of that could be because there's something that's hard there that you don't want to face. So asking yourself, like, is there something here I'm trying to avoid? Is there something hard that I just am not ready for yet? And so being upfront with yourself of saying like, yeah, there's a hard decision. Let's remove all the fluff and the excuses. Here's something that's hard for me. I'm not yet ready to deal with it. Maybe here are the things I need before I can deal with it. The last one is trust that you have the answers. Coaches are trained to not give you advice. We're just trained to remove roadblocks because you have the answers for you. You have your past, you have your strengths, you have your preferences, you have your values, you have your goals and dreams. Nobody around you will know what those are. And so only you have the answers of what's right for you. Once you remove the roadblocks, the limited thinking, get out of the amygdala into the prefrontal cortex, those choices are going to be obvious. And so it's just a matter of choosing them. So
own your question if you're
sure.
If I can interrupt. Jim is asking, how much does role play practice help avoid amygdala hijack?
Role play practice. The thing is like you want to trigger your amygdala to practice. And a lot of times role play, like you're safe, the person, what's going on. So it really, I would say like, best for you, if that would work for you. For me, the key is awareness. Knowing, for me personally, how do I show up in level 1, 2, and 3 where I might be hijacked by the amygdala, right? What does anger look like for me? Well, it's frustration. I get frustrated. I have distrust towards others. I start to distance myself. So when that happens, I know there's a story going on here that I need to address. Or tolerance, what am I tolerating? What am I putting up with? Well, why? So I think it just depends on the person. If it's that you need to practice moving out of amygdala to prefrontal cortex, asking those questions. A great thing about coaching is that you'll start to see the questions are pretty repetitive, right? There's a couple hundred. Each coach uses a good 20, 30 repetitively to get you out of amygdala thinking into prefrontal cortex. And it's things like, how true is that? Where did that idea come from? Who's talking right now in your head? How empowering is that thought? What could be a more empowering thought right now? And so, if having those practice sessions include those sorts of questions, like you'll be able to then start to ask yourself those questions and move into conscious choice quicker. So hopefully that answered it. Am I good to move on?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Just making sure there's nothing followed up. Okay, so the number one choice we own, one of the most empowering choices we own, I can't underscore this enough, is how we show up, right? Nobody else controls how we show up. And so, often we let our situation, our environment dictate our attitude and our energy. You had a bad call with somebody, or you have a personal situation that's not the way you like it. And then you show up, annoyed, frustrated, you take it out on other people. And so realizing that our situation doesn't control how we show up. We can consciously choose that every day. We can choose to be our best, understanding that our best does change day to day with what we're dealing with, but we can still choose, right? So I had a situation a couple years ago where, another company and leadership was not very kind, very dismissive, very kind of bullying. It was a boys' club, to be honest, where it was all about seeming a certain way and telling lies and backing each other up. And it got me really down. And so my work suffered for it. I came in with a crappy attitude, and it just occurred to me one day, wait a minute, like I can still come in with a great attitude and do a great job, and I can own that. And I don't have to have my situation change to make my work, like for me to come to work and do my best. And it was completely empowering. So, we get to decide in any moment, are we going to be focused or distracted? Are we going to be sloppy or prepared? Are we going to be open or closed, interested, dismissive, encouraging, defensive? There's all sorts of ways that we can show up. We can, have fun or be super serious. Like, we can choose that. So I can't, as you're looking to be more empowered in hard situations, choosing how you show up is one of the biggest things that you can do.
Angela, we have another good question, if I could interrupt. The person wrote, I work with young adults, and I try not to provide answers, but make suggestions. Does that hurt the process?
No, not at all. So I asked my mentor coach this when I was learning. I said, like, and mine was different. They seem to be coming from a better place. I just wanted to give advice, right? There's that arrogance there. Like, I know the answer. I know what you should do. And honestly, we all have this in us. And so what my mentor coach said, okay, they teach there are no mistakes. So there are no mistakes. If you want to give advice, but then watch. Do they take your advice or do they not take your advice? And so she's like, they're not going to take your advice. They're going to get excited about it, think it's awesome, and they're not going to do it. They're going to do something else that works for them better. And so suggestions are different. Suggestions are, again, if you're in that overwhelmed state of thinking, you're like, I don't even know where to start. So getting the ball rolling, and we even do a thing where it's like ridiculous. Well, you could go plan to, put a man on the moon. You could go dive to the bottom of the earth. Just get the ball rolling. And so you can come up with, well, how does this sound to you? How well does this align with your strengths? Just give them some things to key off of, but then they're going to choose what works for them. And when they choose something, you're like, ooh, that sounds ridiculous. Just let them go with it. Let them go with it, because you're going to be surprised how often they do it, and it really does work for them. Another way to kind of say the same thing is, if you ask somebody, what's in your refrigerator? They're going to have a hard time thinking of it. Well, I don't know, there's some mustard and mayonnaise and, some other stuff. But if you say well, what are 10 white things in your refrigerator? They're gonna be like, oh yeah, I've got some eggs and mayonnaise and bread. And so it's okay to give them something, a little more structure to grab onto to get started. But in the end, it's got to be their decision. So I'm going to move on. Handling hard moments with confidence. That's kind of why you came here. This is what you want to know about. So let's wrap it up and kind of put it all together. I love this quote: hard choices, easy life; easy choices, hard life, right? Our amygdala wants to make easy choices, but it ends up being a hard life. And I think that's what a lot of us deal with is, when our amygdala takes over too much control. Hard choices, conscious choices, have much better outcomes. And so what does that look like? We have to realize we have agency in every situation. We are not the victim. Even in horrible situations, we still have agency. We have our mindset. We can choose how we're dealing with the situation, how we're looking at it. Recognize and take full ownership of what is yours to own while letting others control what is theirs. If you can separate my attitude, my choices, how I'm showing up in this moment to this hard thing is mine to own, and what other people do, it's hard, but is up to theirs. And when we intersect, then there's boundaries. Facing hard moments headlong consciously and making hard decisions consciously. We love to avoid this. So much easier to run away, but that's where we lose confidence, because deep down we know we're not protecting ourselves, we're not taking care of ourselves. And so the sooner that you can face the hard choices, or even say, I have this hard thing I need to face, I don't know how, I don't even know where to start, what do I need to just even think about it, and start to give yourself what you need, then you're on the path to doing the hard thing. Staying in discomfort and uncertainty rather than running away or blaming others. Again, when things don't feel good, we want to run away. We want to fix it. We want to make it better. A lot of times when other people are having a hard time, we give advice not to help them, but to make their uncomfortableness go away. It's actually very selfish. And so recognize when you're trying to fix, discomfort and uncertainty rather than truly being there. Because if you're truly helping people, you have to sit in the discomfort. You have to be in that situation with them. Right? So practice sitting in discomfort. And then wherever you can, use curiosity, objectivity, discernment in the tough moments rather than being judgmental and defensive. And discernment and judgment can seem similar. They can seem like they're close, but they're completely different. Judgment is good, bad, right, wrong. You know, that person was mean and they're bad. Whereas discernment says, you know, Fred said some harmful things to me. Here are the words he used. Here is how it made me feel. Right? So you can notice the detachment of emotion versus they're bad and they shouldn't have. Right? So that high emotion is a sign of which part of your brain is talking to you. And then choose to live consciously rather than letting our instincts take control. One other note is to give yourself grace, right? Like, we live in a society where perfectionism is like paraded and like approved of and clapped, and it's just not real. So consciously managing our instincts are hard. Like, we are all alive. Our brain has done a great job keeping us alive. Right. And so it's pretty smart at like avoiding even our own conscious thinking. It will use shame. It will use all sorts of stories to stop us from consciously thinking. And so realize, like, this is hard. You're up against a hard, like, opponent when you engage in this sort of living. So shame, like, you know, I should have known this. Why didn't I know better? I'm so stupid, is just another amygdala game. It's another strategy that says, stay in the cave, it's safe here, don't go out there, you know, where a fulfilling life is. Like, we just want you safe. It also keeps you focusing on the past or and creating distraction. So distraction is a amygdala strategy. And so Grace says, like, you did your best. You did your best with what you knew. You did your best at the time. Like there was nothing more you could have done because you always do your best. And so you want to focus, pivot out of what I should have done, the outcome, and pivot into, you know, what are you growing? What are you learning? The process, right? So you control the process. You don't control the outcome. So focus on what you do control, which is, you know, I'm learning, I'm growing. I realized something new today. I'll take that with me tomorrow. At the same time, keep in mind level 3, that tolerance. Real growth takes conscious effort and brutal honesty. It is not easy. Like, it's really easy to avoid this sort of thing. Like, you know, you could use grace and be like, I did my best. I'm not going to try. It is hard to face your denial, your avoidance, your biases, your shame stories, your limited beliefs, right? Because you feel like they're true, especially when you get into limiting beliefs. Like, I'm not really good at this. You know, I don't feel like I deserve to be loved. These things feel really true, and it's painful to confront them, but it's also extremely liberating, right? So give yourself grace, but at the same time, be prepared to be brave. So a couple last slides. Did I say anything about positivity? I am an anti-positivity person because positivity is really a coping mechanism, or can be, is most often a coping mechanism, right? Your amygdala, you can rah and sunshine, confetti, unicorn, you know, come up with all sorts of big statements. It's not going to quell your fears, right? Forced positivity is more coping, tolerance, denial, avoidance. It's making, you've heard the phrase, putting lipstick on a pig. You're just like, la, that ugly thing. We're just going to pretend like it's not there. Instead, address reality as it is, use curiosity, objectivity, discernment to see what's really going on, to see real opportunities, you know, before we only solve problems. And when you do that, there is a real positivity that you will feel. It is the effect of conscious, objective, non-judgmental thinking, right? It's the other way around. So if you're interested on coaching, this is just kind of some info. We're accredited by the International Coach Federation. Takes about 9 to 12 months, 300 hours of training. We're trained in generating awareness, confronting catabolic or amygdala mindsets, and bringing people to empowered choice. The word coaching is actually from the word stagecoach. It means getting people from point A to point B. And so when you have something you want to achieve, you have somewhere you want to go, and you want somebody to help remove the roadblocks, you use a coach. We are trained in modeling anabolic, non-judgment mindsets. Those are the higher mindsets, 4, 5, 6. We're trained in holding that uncomfortable space with empathy and compassion. And we have to go a lot of self-development work. Like, we have to be coached, face a lot of our uncomfortable gremlins as a part of the process. So I always tell people, if you cry in coaching, like, it's totally okay. Like, your coaches have cried too, right? Because it's hard. Like, truly, I say that kind of finding humor in the shared human experience, but it's hard. So our process is very much what I just told you. We listen for stress and judgment. We use that 7 awareness system to figure out where their people are at and where they move up and down. We get curious of what they're afraid of and why. We acknowledge and validate their feelings to normalize it. And then we bring awareness. We challenge the limiting beliefs, and then we bring them to the point where they can make choice. And then we provide accountability. Did you do the thing you said you were going to do? So in summary, these are my top takeaways for you. Notice your stress and your judgment, the negative stories and the protection strategies. Those are your keys of who's talking, and it's not your prefrontal cortex, right? Once you notice, you can do something about it faster. Don't believe everything you think, right? Our primal brains are awesome at creating illusion. You know, that mean, horrible Amazon driver over there, right? That's not what really happened, but I believed it in the time. And that those stories are there to protect us, right? So our brains jump to conclusions. The amygdala has limited resources, so it has to make those jumps to protect us. The directive of conserving resources allows the primal brain to be our default thinking, right? You can say, like, you have this knowledge, I should always use conscious thought. Well, no, your brain's going to say don't, because, like, I want to conserve resources. You have to consciously prioritize the time and effort to objectively assess a stressful situation, to remove yourself from it. My boyfriend has a saying of, am I in the balcony or am I in the floor? Sometimes you got to get up to the balcony to see what's going on. Remember to meet yourself where you're at. And I say, stop shooting all over yourself, right? Everybody has an amygdala. Everybody deals with this. It's okay that you have these sorts of thoughts and reactions. So accept what's real for you so you can move on to conscious thinking sooner. The next is meet reality where it's at. Like, oh, it would be nice if the world just acted the way that we want it to, but that's not the way it is. You have an amygdala. It's trying to tell us that this is what should be. It feels true, but it's not truth. So you've got to see reality as it is, even if it's ugly, right? You got to face it. Hard choices, face those hard choices as soon as you're able. Ask yourself, what do you need to deal with it? The fastest way to feel confident is to be brave and face those hard choices. So that is it. Do we have any questions?
We have a number of them. I'm going to ask you the quickest one first, and then I'll get to the last 2.
Okay.
Somebody's asking, is there a way to get a copy of the slides from today's presentation?
Yep, happy to, however you want to send those out.
Okay. The next one is from Aaron. Would you recommend journaling or encouraging our clients to journal and play back these events so that we can map against your techniques?
Oh, that's really interesting. Again, people have agency and conscious choice. So you have to ask, like, they have to acknowledge that there's a problem and that they want to participate in solving the problem. And so it sounds like this solution would work for you. So you can say, like, this is something I'm doing that helps me. And I'd love to share it with you if you're open to me sharing my process with you. And now that I've shared it with you, would you be interested in doing something like this? Would you see this as beneficial? And so again, honoring that we all have agency and free choice. If you can do that and do it in an encouraging way, rather than you should do this and we should, right? Then absolutely, like trust yourself. You have the answers. So if you think that this is a great idea, as long as you honor the other person's agency, go for it and then see what happens, because like there is no right answer and there is no making a mistake. Yeah, if you're coming from that, again, creativity, objectivity, what's an opportunity here, go for it.
All right, the last a little bit longer, so I'm going to read it all out. I work with a peer consultant on a project that is portraying a victim and blaming me personally for their failure. When I try to make boundaries and make them accountable for the work, I am blamed for the failure of the work, even though this work was the responsibility of the consultant. Management supports the other consultant regardless of what the real world view is on the situation. The support has emboldened the other consultants that they are untouchable. As well, they are positioning themselves in a role of authority over myself and other team members. I shared my concerns with management with no actionable responses. How do I protect myself moving forward?
Yeah, that is so hard, right? Like, start with acknowledge and validating. You're in a really hard situation, a very stressful situation where you're not being supported and you're being blamed, right? So what you can do is say, like, well, what's my part to own? How am I contributing to this? And look at it as openly and bravely as you can and own that. Boundaries, it starts with making people aware, right? So, I wanted to share that I value X, Y, and Z. The actions that you do here are not in line with my values. And so this is how I need you to treat me. And if you can't do that, here are the consequences. And so realize, and it's so hard to come from a place of objectivity and that prefrontal cortex when you feel threatened by that person. So like how doing your best to prepare yourself to come from a place of not taking it personally. And then when you have that hard conversation, it sounds like you have, but like, there may be ways that you can see if it's more effective. And I'm happy to like talk more specifically about you. So like that's my email address if you want to reach out. The next is you still have choice. If you're in a position where your team is not enabling you to succeed, you have the choice to leave, or you have the choice to go find another position somewhere else, right? Like if you're doing everything that you know to enable a solution and it's not being heard, then, are you hurting yourself by staying? And you have to ask yourself, like, well, why am I staying? So it's like that one, that is a thing that I would say talk to somebody about. Like, I'm happy to talk to you about. It's complicated. It's not simple. The details matter. But it sounds like you're on the right path. But yeah, just realize, like, what do you control and how much are you willing to tolerate, put up with, and what are your other options, if that makes sense.
That was our last question.
Okay, awesome. Yay, right on 2 o'clock. Well, thanks everybody. I really appreciate it. I hope this was useful. My email address is there. I would love any other questions, comments, thoughts, anything you think could be better, anything that you thought was confusing. Would love your feedback. So that's it. Thanks for that.
Thank you all for attending today's virtual Lunch and Learn. And Angela, thank you for sharing coaching techniques for managing uncomfortable situations. The recording of the session will be available the next business day. To view the recording, locate the Session for Improving's virtual events page. As a reminder, all of our virtual Lunch and Learns are recorded and shared for your convenience. Thank you and have a wonderful weekend.